Welcome back. You're watching Money, Money, Money. Interest rate cuts make big news whenever they take place. But are they really big news for average consumers like you and me? Does it make a difference in your life? Harsh Rungta of apnapaisa.com is our expert this week. And Harsh, we've spoken a lot about what it actually means in theory. But let's talk about practice now. You spoke earlier about existing borrowers versus the new borrowers and how either or could be at a disadvantage. What does a person do in that case? If I already have a home loan and the process to shift it to another bank is so cumbersome, how do I negotiate with my own bank? I mean, what are my options?
So I think one of the best options for the existing consumers is to talk to his own bank. Tell him I'm going to shift. Okay. And typically most banks have what are called customer retention cells. So if you have been one of those good customers, paid your installments on time, your property is good, etc., you'll invariably get a call from the customer retention cell, sir, why do you want to shift? Okay, and we will give you the lower rate. And if they give you, then it makes sense. They will charge you a fee. Again, that's extremely unfair to charge a fee to shift from one floating rate to another. But I think in the practical situation, for most consumers who are not willing to make at least a little bit of effort, paying that 0.25 or 0.3% fee to get the rate that he would get in the market, as long as the rate that he now gets is the same as what he would get from another player, it's worthwhile paying that 0.3%. If they are not willing to do it, and some banks don't, they'll charge you 0.3 and not shift you to the rate that they give to the new consumers. Still, in which case, just make a little effort. Okay, slight effort. I mean, you can use marketplaces. Now there are players who can come to you at your doorstep and they will pick documents from you and get you that loan transfer. So I think some little bit of effort if you do, you can benefit greatly. So I think to summarize, the first option is pay a small little fee to get to the market rate with your existing lender. Nice, clean, small cost. Or shift. Shifting today, there is no prepayment charge. There could be a small processing charge, which also most lenders are happy to bear. There can be a small 0.2% stamp duty charge in Maharashtra. In other states it could be lower. That is about the cost that you would have to bear for shifting.
Okay. So while we're on this subject, I want to ask you, a question that practically comes up very often when people actually go end up taking loans, is that at least the first EMI becomes a big point of contention, right? Because sometimes you may take it, say, on the 25th of a month, your first EMI may be due on the 10th, and yet you may end up paying interest for an entire month, which is really unfair, right?
I think most banks have a system. For example, if I was to give an example, that if I took the loan, say, disbursement on April 24th, and I have to pay my EMIs on the 10th of every month, and so then the choice can be that on the 10th of May, which is the next 10th falling, I can pay for 16 days interest, and my first EMI begins from 10th of June. Or even if I pay the full EMI on 10th of May, the breakup of that EMI between interest and principal, the interest is only for 16 days. So the principal portion is higher. And then obviously the other months similarly, the repayment will similarly happen. I think this is now changing to the disadvantage of the customers in some cases. We don't yet know how widespread this practice is. But I mean, in such a case, if on 10th of May I have to pay an EMI in which I pay for the full month's interest, that's effectively a processing charge. So I mean, this is clearly not just unfair, it is unethical as well. This portion, there is no doubt that this is wrong. And yet it is happening. We don't know how widespread it is. But clearly, this is something that the regulator should definitely look at.
And it's even worse if the date of disbursement and the date of your first EMI is the same, because then you don't even have that 16 days of leeway, right?
Yeah, so if, for example, in the same example, if the disbursement happened on 10th May and I was to pay the EMI on the 10th of May, then obviously the EMI should be completely principal.
Yeah.
There is no interest. But if in that also I have to pay 1 month's interest, that's actually an additional charge. And this is something which is not called for, and which is not as per the agreement that the institution has with the borrower.
All right. Anything else that home loan borrowers should be looking out for?
This buyer beware, caveat emptor, buyer beware, I think is very old philosophy. Clearly, consumer protection has moved on in other economies. In our own, we have the Sri Krishna Committee report, where they are saying that it has to be seller beware. The seller's responsibilities are not over simply by disclosing everything. If I give you, you are a regular buyer, I give you a disclosure of 5 pages, okay, on a subject.
You're probably never going to read it.
Absolutely. So, just by simply giving you a 5-page document that tells you how to make a nuclear bomb, if you make it wrong, this will become a nuclear bomb, I can't be absolved of my responsibilities. I think very clearly, it is, as a seller, there has to be responsibilities. And I think, whilst we are moving in that direction, one of the things that can definitely happen is that grievance redressal needs to move into, it is not just individual grievances. The kind of grievance that we spoke about, where interest is charged for the full month.
But one example.
That's one example. Or lowering of rates not get. These are systemic issues, and these should be solved on a systemic basis through a grievance mechanism that either exists with the existing regulators, or, as has been proposed by the finance minister, a common grievance across all sectors. So I think we should have the ability to go back, examine the player's conduct, and if the player's conduct has been contrary to the laid down process, then there needs not just, this is unjust enrichment, so not just the unjust enrichment should be given back, there has to be punitive fines on the players so that they dare not think about doing that in the future. Profit pressures are always going to be there, but you can't make profit at the expense of the consumer without telling the consumer. I think there is a difference between legitimate profit and not so legitimate.
Yeah, just like a bank would look at a borrower's credit rating, perhaps it's time for the banks to have a rating, you know, that the regulators could look at and judge their past performance. Harsh Rungta, thanks very much for joining in. And not just for joining in, but for actually breaking down this subject for our viewers and helping them understand what will actually be of practical value to them. Thanks very much for joining in. On that note, it's time for a quick break. Still ahead is our tip of the week. Stay tuned.